Hi, I wanted to go over some items about mentoring. And this, for the most part, comes out of the work that you have done. So it's kind of like a summary. But as I was going through the discussion board, there were a lot of things that kind of came out. So this is kind of call it a collective summary of what I was able to read in your reflections. One of the things that we talked about was I wrote down friends because one of you posted that you can't really be friends with the mentor. And that's sort of true. If you become friends with a mentor and become very close, what happens is that person may lose their bias and you may not be able to get the kind of feedback that you need. So your mentor is not a friend. Now, this is not to say that you can't have a lifelong relationship with this mentor. They become a very important part of your life, and that at some point later on, you become almost like a protege to this person. But they're probably not formally mentoring you. They're just someone you could go to for advice and you feel comfortable with. So roles can change. But I thought that was an interesting reflection that someone had listed. Mentoring is a long-lasting process. And as I just said, it's potential that someone could mentor you for a couple years, and that even though you're not formally in that mentoring cycle together, you're with them the rest of your life. I will hear people my age say, oh, they were my mentor, they've been my mentor my whole life and stuff like that. And I just think that's wonderful because those are really the success stories. Your mentor should have a level of expertise. And I think this is when we get into some of the negative mentoring. And there are five types of negative mentoring. But one of them is when your mentor does not have that level of expertise. And you really need to size that up early. If you find out that person doesn't have the level of expertise you need, then you have to look at other opportunities or other situations to kind of fill in those gaps. You still have to be responsible even if the mentor is not living up to your expectations. You have to find a way around this. Somebody wrote down that a mentor needs to be younger, and a mentor does not need to be younger. Or the mentee would be younger and the mentor is always older. That's actually not the case. I have had mentors that are younger than me mentor me. And there's actually a thing now called reverse mentoring. And that's when someone that's new to an organization or a business comes into it, but they have a lot of tech experience and maybe an older person doesn't. And so they actually mentor the older person. So this is common. They actually have a name for it. So reverse mentoring. And it is the idea that someone that comes into the organization with maybe less organizational experience but has some other skill set can actually mentor someone. We think of that reverse mentoring with students who help teachers who have been in the trade for a long time, the career for a long time, and maybe don't have those technology skills, and students can help us. So that's a good example of reverse mentoring. It also talked about, somebody wrote something about sharing personal experiences with a mentor. You know, that really depends on your relationship with a mentor. I mean, if you want to get close to that person and share personal things, if they're impacting your professional life, if you're in a professional mentoring or a formalized mentoring program, then certainly you may want to do that. But you really have to kind of figure out as the mentor where you want to draw the line and how cozy you want to get. And as a mentee, you need to figure out what's appropriate and what's not. So that goes back to that very beginning when we talk about the first thing you have to do in a mentoring relationship is lay out the expectations. What are the expectations on both sides? What does the mentor want? What does the mentee want? And then how do you map out something that you can both live with? And then that's part of that negotiation at that time period. Somebody talked about customized assistance. I thought that was a really neat term. Customized assistance, because that's what a mentor is. They're kind of customizing the assistance just for you. It's very personalized. So that was a great term. We talked about a more experienced person to be your mentor. And it can be a more experienced person. It could be a more knowledgeable person, a more skilled person. It could be of any age, of any race, of anything. We really don't want to narrow that down. So we need that term to be very broad because we can gain insight from a lot of different situations. I'm white. So having someone who is a Black mentor may actually be very good for me because they may be able to explain things to me that I may not always understand, and vice versa. So I think it could be helpful. I know we have a tendency, though. I know at the university level, we'll put black with black. We try to put woman with woman, white with white. I mean, there's an effort that normally goes into that, but it doesn't have to be like that. A lot of times we look at with the minority possibly not being comfortable with somebody of a different race. So we need to be aware of it from that concern, but keep in mind that we really want people to grow and to learn in their capacity. Somebody talked about the two perspectives, and I thought this was great. There are two very distinct perspectives. One is as a mentor and one is as a mentee. And they're not always going to be the same perspective. You're going to look at things a little differently. You're going to feel a little different about things. So when you're working through this and you're thinking of mentoring, put yourself in both shoes. Think of it in terms of, if I was a mentor, how would I feel? If I was a mentee, how I feel? And that's an easy way to be able to answer questions. If you look at it from both lenses, it'll give you that ability to be able to reflect on it a little easier, I think. Somebody talked about protege. They thought that was really cool that Dr. Garvey talked about protege. And yes, that's a mentor is a protege. It's however you want to look at it. There was also a really nice comment that talked about that mentoring comes natural to some individuals and to some it never does. And this is very true. It's unfortunate that we see people mentoring that should never be mentoring. It's not that mentoring is an innate ability, but definitely the better mentors do have some innate inness to them. It's the same thing with leaders. You can develop a leader, but if they have those innate skills, they're usually a lot better. They become great leaders compared to being a good leader. And I think it's the same thing with a mentor. A lot of you identified the skill sets that you have, and you compared that with, those were good mentoring skills to have. So think in terms of, as we're going through this process and you're looking at these three practices, what are the type of characteristics or behaviors you would expect in a mentor? And when we get to coaching, executive coaching, think about what kind of behaviors and skill sets that person should have, as well as self-mentoring. And then kind of do a comparison in your mind and see where you think you fit. But I thought that was a unique and interesting thing. I might actually add that into a future course. I thought it was so great. Let me see if there's anything else on my list. Somebody talked about a sub-mentor. I thought this was hysterical. I don't know if I ever had heard this before or thought of it, but somebody talked about the idea that you had a mentor and then your mentor went on maternity leave, or say your mentor had surgery or was sick or in a car accident or something, and they received another mentor, but the mentor was only there for the temporary period of time to cover while the main mentor was gone. And they called it a sub-mentor. I thought that was so cute. I can honestly say I've never thought of the term sub-mentor. And I'm actually going to use that. I thought that was wonderful. But anyway, so this is kind of the takeaway for me from reading all your reflections. And I like to kind of give you a summary because I know you guys get busy and you don't read everybody's when they post them. So if I give you a summary, I think it kind of wraps it all up. And it's actually very insightful for me. It's very reflective. I can go through and I learn something every time I do this. So I'm looking on my list. I think I've kind of covered everything. Most of you talked about communication being the most important thing in the relationship, and that's definitely. But looks like I've got it covered. But anyway, thank you. Thank you for such wonderful reflections. I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to read the ones on coaching. So have a good evening.